begin with a GM scene. A crackling sound. A swirling of black and white lights. A momentary pause in time. The sound of Caspar's boots planting on a cold stone floor. A crunching of broken cogs and wires echo as he steps forward. Panning upward, we see the sky above is gone, replaced by a permanent, oppressive ceiling of rolling, static-laced clouds. Colossal pylons dominate what we can see of the landscape, each one a tower of chrome and obsidian humming with malevolent energy that disrupts our senses. The smell of hot metal accompanied by a faint sweetness reminds you of home. The air, a cacophony of groaning metal and whispers of static. This is what powers the heart of this world. Continuing on his path forward, Caspar reaches the heart as humming grows louder, earth trembling beneath him. Approaching the shrine, we see a central console with dozens of crystalline sockets arranged in a complex spiraling pattern. Each of these sockets holding a soul treasure. Each can be seen clearly. The blade of a hero, the staff of a spellcaster, the pistol of a bounty hunter. All of them now trapped in a fist-sized jewel of light. These prisons, a moment of profound mortal significance, love, ambition, despair, are all converted crystallizations of raw emotional energy, though one empty socket remains. Looking down at his hand, Caspar holds the soul treasure aloft, admiring it momentarily.
I finally got you. Now, you and everyone else will pay for failing to protect my dear Amira all those years ago.
Caspar stretches his hand outward, the same evil grin ever present on his face, and slowly turns it over, preparing to set the last treasure in its place alongside the others.
Welcome in, Shield Brothers and Shield Maidens, to Shield's Rest. I'm Brown, and I'm joined here today with Fry, once again, as we continue our dive into Fabula Ultima. This time we'll be covering Chapter 5, The Game Master. If you haven't checked out the other videos in the series, please take a moment to do so, or watch them following this video. I think they'll be very helpful, and we kind of tell a story along the way, which you should enjoy. But first, we'll start with the Game Master's primary role, which consists of really a couple different things I'll be diving into before you play. The most important thing from this part of the chapter is to take a look at all the different classes. You should already have an idea of who's going to be playing in the campaign or the short session, so that you know how to develop the story and work elements in that are pertinent to each player character. For example, in the playtest or one shot that we'll be doing, we already know what our characters are going to be. So we have Tristan, who you already are familiar with. He is a Fury Wayfarer Weapon Master. And what this book does for Fabula Ultima is it really kind of gives you a picture shot of each class and what might be good elements to add in for them. So what we have here is a short temper or knowledge of terrain if they travel a lot, and also a mastery of weapons from a mentor. So you've kind of seen that from Tristan already if you've watched the previous videos. He is quick to take action, and with that comes a little bit of anger, and also he clearly is really affectionate towards his sensei, who gives him the mastery of his martial arts. Next, we're going to have one of our players be a lore master and spiritist. And so what you want to give with that kind of character is knowledge of a lot of things, right? You might want to be feeding inside scoops, in a sense, to the lore master of the group, because they really should know about everything or be able to add or even improve elements of the story. So you want to give them things where they can add detail, right? Don't be afraid to pass the scene to them of, like, you walk into a room, you see X, what else do you see? The lore master might be really familiar with books and things that they read, and they might know environments or have already read about them even if they've never been there. So really easy way to play on that side of things and add some detail to the story and the campaign that everyone can benefit from. The other side of that is the spiritist. So you want to add elements that capitalize on life and death and things of that spiritual realm. And I'm not going to steal Fry's thunder, but you'll see as we go through this and maybe in the playtest how we weave that in. We have taken that into consideration with our own group that we're going to run through this game with. And then one of our last players, Joe, he's going to be playing a Dark Blade and a Chimerist. Some of the elements you want to see there, right? Obviously, if you're a Chimerist, you're raised around animals or plants, or maybe you have an affinity for technology. So, since we are focusing on the more tech, technological side of this world, techno fantasy, we're going to be giving him, a sense of a background, kind of to play the role in a way of why does he have this affection towards technology, and what does it mean to him? Why is it so important? And then with the Dark Blade side of things, maybe something has interrupted that or taken that away that he's, vengeful for or trying to get after. And so that could have led to him going down that Dark Blade path. We also do want to weave in some elements from the Chimera side a little bit more as far as bringing in unique or special monsters or creatures where he can really use that spell mimic skill and maybe pick up some of the skills and spells that he'll see along the way. So those kind of three things and the three characters that we'll have playing, I think, will make for the basis of a great story, and you can always weave those in with each session as you go. Uh, with that, I kind of alluded to it, but I'll pass it over to Fry for what you should kind of consider and talk about during the session 0 so that you can include these things and more detail.
For sure. And just to kind of like touch on those two before I like dive into the session 0, I think for lore master, especially when you have, if there's ever a moment where you're like, there's this like cool piece of information, maybe I should like hide it behind a check, right? Instead of like hiding behind the check, you could just give that to the lore master. Like everybody knows this, but like you find this one piece of information. Like what I like about the lore masters, instead of like hiding it, you can just give it to them, and that's a nice little bonus that they get. Um, and then yeah, like you said with the chimeras too, make sure you're just throwing beasts, plants, whatever it is at them so that they're getting spells. I think chimeras especially has been the one I like the most, and the one I would be like excited to play. Like we will get to run for it because it gives you the opportunity to pull in random creatures just for them to like capitalize on that. But that does lead right there into the session 0. Not going to go over it all step by step. I think the key highlight with a session 0 in this game and like any other game, right, is just to make sure you're just laying it all out there for the team, right? Um, get their inputs, get their ideas, and just build upon them. Um, and as they like, speak to your characters, especially in this, because not only are the classes like so kind of like different, unique, and they all have like kind of story built into them. When you're selecting them, they have questions on the GM side. It tells you kind of what to look for with their backstories. If you just let them go and you sit there and take notes, right, you're gonna get all the villains you need, all the theatrics and threats that you're gonna need. That session 0, I think a lot of it has to do with you as the GM. Is you're just guiding them in the right direction and then just letting them kind of discuss and build upon it, and you're going to get kind of like all the ammo you need to, I'm sure, complete like 90% of your prep for those first few sessions. So, and with all that, start them off with a bang, right? That first session, I would, as you will see, combat's probably going to happen fairly early. You want to get them into it, get them into the game, start off big, get them excited, pull those elements from those characters, right? Not to give away too much, but I'll definitely be throwing in something for our Chimera's character there in the first combat. So that's all in that session 0, right? And then as you move through that, you get into those first games. During the play itself, you want to make sure you're seeking input from the characters. Every session, at the end, tell them what they like, what they didn't like, what they're looking forward to. Pull from their classes, their identities. That session 0 is going to lead directly into your play, in that you're going to establish everything that their character is looking for, right? Their bonds, their ideals, their traits. That is going to be your source material for everything, and it is part of the session 0. It's part of the character creation process, and that's what I kind of really like about the GMing side of this, is that you're forced to kind of build all the building blocks that you're going to need for your campaign. So just make sure during play itself, focus on those, and then keep the action just going. This is a very cinematic, narrative focused forward game. Don't worry about filler. If you're going from point A to point B, and as a GM, nothing really needs to happen there, do a quick montage scene. Hey, this is what you see over the next few days, and boom, we're here, right? Just keep the story rolling. And then finally, in between the sessions, make sure you're discussing with their characters what their goals are, what their objectives are. Like I said, at the end of each session, ask them what are they looking forward to, what is the next plan. That way you're keeping the story rolling, right? You're coming to the next session, you already have the building blocks. I keep saying that, building blocks of what you need, but that's all GMing is, right? It's just having those things prepared and ready, and be open with your players about those. That way you can always keep the pressure high, keep the fun high, keep it cinematic, and use those to pull inspiration to create unique creatures, right? Like in the case of the chimeras, right? We are techno heavy, right? So in the game, it says monsters, beasts, and plants, but if he wants to be more techno focused, maybe I make some techno beasts instead, right? That's where you pull the class into it and you just keep those rolling in between sessions, right? And getting those ready, and then just stay inspired with that, with your characters. Let them give you the inspiration. They're going to be the source of what they want you to prep. So that is kind of what, in a nutshell, what the GMing side of this is supposed to feel like as far as your prep work is concerned. But all of that prep work, right, leads into the plan of who is the villain, who is the big bad. And so I'll throw that back over to Mark to kind of discuss what all that ties into in the end. You're taking all these sources to ultimately create your BBG, your big bad evil guy, your ultimate villain.
Yeah, and if you haven't noticed it yet, this whole really system is defined around building this story together. And like Fry just hit on, you're the GM. You're just taking notes during session 0. You've got the whole campaign planned out because you know exactly like what people's ambitions are, what their ideas are for their character, and you're just I'm getting ahead a little bit, but you're kind of mirroring that in a way. And so with the art of the villains, right? They're this covers various things, but I'm just gonna again pull out some highlights. So the goals of the villain, right? And we've touched on it in one of our other videos, but if you go over the different kind of categories of villains, right, you start with a minor villain. So a goal that they might have, what the book recommends is, something simple or personal, such as stealing a magical artifact, something of kind of small insignificance. But once you take that villain on, right, they're not just going to get thwarted that one time and be gone. The point of this game is that you're going to escalate them or they're going to continue to be a pain. So once they push into that major category, now they're looking at things that are affecting a large number of people. I mean, they're sacrificing people or, threatening whole kingdoms at that point. And then again, once you thwart them or stop them, they're going to keep going until they can't. Once you enter that supreme level, that's where you're affecting the entire world and, laws and everything. So our narrative intros, again, go watch the other videos, have been a very quickly escalated story, right? It's supposed to be like a condensed thing, but you can kind of see that from Caspar. He started out just planting a bomb at the Cogheart. Now, in our one shot, later, he's effectively trying to destroy the entire technological system, the heart of the world, if you will. So definitely you can see that escalation really quickly in our in our 5 videos we've done, but imagine that over a long campaign and chasing this person constantly and things like that. You also want to have pressure, right, with each of those categories. So on your minor villains, you're doing stuff that's like, if you use a clock, for example, it's kind of easier to manage. It's just like 4 successful attempts or iterations of a clock, where with Supreme, you'd have something more like 8 or 10. You want to keep your villain equal to pressure against the party, right? And that'll kind of naturally flow as you're progressing together alongside the villain in a way. But the main focus is that dark mirror. I think Fry mentioned that in one of our other videos. An example of this would be that your villains are usually elite or champions, which we'll get into a little bit later as well, but they want to be equal to like boss fights. And what this means is that if the heroes have a lot of hope or they're after hope or something, the villain always represents despair. If the players are, have that camaraderie, they're always together, they're always one and united. The villain is that one who's been alone and abandoned and kind of suffering from that, which is, really their identity for lashing out and things of that nature. And then you want to have dramatic entrances, like he's already covered. But again, that example of setting the bomb at the Cogheart, that was the first time you saw or heard of Caspar in our narrative intros. It was like, oh my gosh, this guy's here just doing crazy stuff all of a sudden. And you want to keep that cinematic feel throughout this. And that dramatic entrance is a great way to dive right into it. Give your players a villain right off the bat. They are chasing that guy until the end, really, unless you want to kill him off and bring in something new. But you can always do that. You can have multiple villains. But this is a great system for kind of managing that flow. And another aspect of this game is kind of on your way to those villains, right? You're going to run into things and stories along the way and landscapes and dungeons and things you've never been into. And so this book kind of outlays for the dungeon master, game master, let me correct myself, how you would prepare and create those things. So I'll let Fry talk more about that side of it.
Yeah, and I'll say too, don't be afraid to like let your villain change, right? The in the book it describes the escalation as their rejection of the heroes, right? So every fight, like we mentioned before, isn't always about, destroying or like ending your villain, right? Killing your villain. It's about just stopping them and defeating them and hopefully giving them the opportunity to change, right? So, and if your characters have put up a good fight, or maybe they've discovered the villains' motivations and they've like kind of shown them the error of their ways, you can always flip them, right? Make them an NPC, make them a hero too. So don't be afraid to do that part as well. They don't always have to escalate. Just, feel out the vibe, feel out what's going on with the game. But all right, and then so as far as the dungeon goes, first want to touch on the different kind of types or the different kind of ways to prepare a dungeon as it's laid out on the game master side. First and foremost, dungeon crawling isn't really a aspect of Fabula Ultima, or at least it's not the intended aspect of it. Dungeons will be there, there's always a crevice to explore, things like that. But as far as like deep diving into a dungeon, we're there for several sessions or things like that, huge drawn out maps of dungeon isn't the intent of it. You certainly could. There's nothing against it, and it's not going to bog down the game if that's what you and your table are interested in. Just know that not to say that the building of a dungeon, as far as the Game Master's Guide go, is pretty bare bones. It gives you kind of ways to run through them and to kind of get from point A to point B, and what Fabula Ultima's intent is with dungeons. If you do want to get something more a bit in depth, you'll probably have to go through, homebrew sources or things like that, which I will touch on a little bit later in the video on some options for that. But as far as the Game Master section here goes, first you have to decide or determine the dungeon you're going to be using, whether it's prepared or improvised, right? So obviously a prepared dungeon is one that you already know the players are going to get. For our purposes, right, for our one shot, ours is going to be a prepared dungeon. We know the players are going to be there. We're kind of dropping them off, quote unquote, at the entrance, so to speak, and they know where they're going to be going. So ours is going to be a little bit more planned. We have some things already kind of set aside for it. And then you can also just have what the book refers to as an improvised dungeon. So that is, you've been going along the journey, they've done their travel days, right, and they rolled on their travel days that they discover something. Well, we may not have a dungeon prep for that. There are a couple tables in here to roll real quick. Say, this is what the dungeon looks like, gives you some brief descriptions, this is what they find in the end, or this is what the kind of challenge they have through that, and you kind of move along your way. So you don't have to prepare a dungeon if you don't want to. If the dungeons pop up, it's got some tables for you to roll on, and you just kind of go about your way. So with that, to prepare your dungeon, if you are going to prepare one that does have 6 steps on here that we'll kind of go through briefly, and we'll show you what we kind of did with our dungeon here. So first you want to do the general look or mood of the dungeon. Spooky is a lavish castle, network of ancient tunnels. For us, we have dubbed ours the Weeping Grid. We'll go more into the specifics of the descriptor when we're doing our one shot, but it's very technological heavy. There's going to be a lot of data clouds, electric wires. We described a little bit in this video. Then that's pretty much the mood, right? It's dark, kind of gloomy, technology focused. And that's just step one, right? What does your dungeon look? What does your dungeon feel like? Then you would sketch a rough map of the dungeon. So for us, we're not going to have too much as far as a layout. Like there's not going to be any left, rights, explore the dungeon, you reach a dead end or anything like that. For me, what this means is more the functionality of the dungeon. Do you have the steps prepped, the order in which things are going to occur? Do you know if your dungeon's going up, down, left, or right, things like that? Just have those in mind. If you want to draw a detailed dungeon, by all means, go ahead. There's nothing against it, but at a minimum, it's just going to be like, do you know the functions of your dungeon, what you're trying to accomplish here? Once you have that, just have that stuff prepped and ready to describe to your characters. And maybe have some spots where your characters can describe it as well. Once you give your general look of that, the player should have hopefully a good feel. Give them the reins on that and see what they kind of see as they explore throughout the dungeon. Then, of course, you're going to want to place your rewards. We'll kind of get into that a little bit as well. But just know, do you want to drop some magic items? Do you want to drop some money? Do you want to maybe give them some more inventory points and things like that, right? You just have your rewards ready and what they need to do to get them. Maybe they'll just be there and they'll find it no matter what, or maybe you propose an obstacle or a threat, which is step 4. And if they get through that, great, they get the reward, or if they have to find their way around it, or if they have to come up with another means as opposed to that, then the reward goes away. So definitely reward them for creativity and overcoming obstacles in really extravagant and great way. And then for step 5, you want to go with maybe 1 or 2 danger clocks. So we mentioned those a little bit in this video and previous videos, and these are just something to count down, right? Maybe they triggered a trap, maybe the area is flooding, right? Or there's a bomb that's about to go off, okay? You want to have something that's a danger clock, something for a countdown, because you don't want everything to be combat, combat, combat. Throw a clock in there just to give them a little bit of variety into it and give them something to push them through the dungeon. And then finally, step 6 is, what is the focal point? What is the end? Is this where your antagonist is? Is this where they find the treasure? Is this where they get that piece of information that they've been looking for? Just what is the point of the dungeon? What are they trying to get through to get to the end of it? So for ours, primarily, our characters will be looking for Caspar, maybe some secondary or tertiary things might pop up once they get there, but for the most part, that is the focal point of the dungeon, is they are going to be trying to find Caspar. So. And then, like I said, with every dungeon, at the end, you want to have a focal point. Once you accomplish that focal point, you want to have a reward, right? One of those could be a rare item, which the game or the book also provides ways to craft some rare items. Has some thoughts on that, so I'll toss it back over to Brown to talk about the item side of the house there.
Can't wait to get in that dungeon. No. Yeah, but
It'll be fun.
for the rare items, right? So there's the different categories. There's weapons, armors, accessories, and artifacts. Those are all something that you can make a rare item for. Just a couple of keynotes here to keep in mind. You obviously want to be careful with the bonuses that you're giving a rare item. You want to make sure that it's somewhat balanced to the tempo of where you're at in the story or the campaign. You don't want to start out with, oh, here's a rare item and it's one of the best ones in the game. I mean, I guess you could work around that, but maybe they have to protect it or something. But typically, you want to make sure that if it's something they're going to be actively using, it's balanced, right? You kind of want to avoid copying things that already exist just because, why would you? You want to use this in more of a unique way. And you want to really look at, again, kind of like how the story brings in different elements from depending on what classes are in play. You want to bring in what classes are in play and you want to synergize with what they currently have as far as skills or capabilities. Obviously, something that's really useful for them and that connects with the group identity in a sense. And then it does make a special note in here, which I appreciate, that if you do mess up or make it too strong, or later on you're like, ooh, I kind of didn't like the way I did that, just, be transparent, which is spread throughout this game, and communicate, hey guys, I messed that up. We're going to make a decision to change this. What do you think? And kind of work it together, tweak those items if need be. You don't want to ruin your story because you've got some super overpowered item that you got at the beginning, right? But it does break down a couple different ways. So you want to either start with a existing item or make a whole new one, right? But there are a couple steps that you can do, 4 steps that this lays out specifically. And I'm not going to go over them all in super detail, but we are going to bring in a rare item, right? That one of our player characters will be able to utilize in this dungeon that Fry has created. And it's probably going to be an item that they can equip and use effectively. It's going to be something that's built off of a rare item that already exists, but I have tailored it to fit our player character that will be getting it, and adding some elements in there that are going to really drive and impact the story, maybe help that character be a little bit more effective, and maybe be the spotlight hero they should be, right? So I'll stop there. But step 1 is just, again, choose a weapon or make a new one, and you can look at the ones that are currently in the book. Then you want to decide what type of damage it would deal. Typically it's physical, right, if it's like a dagger or a sword, but you can make that sword or dagger do bolt, air, fire, earth, any of the elemental damages. If you choose to do that, you're basically just increasing the cost of that rare item. It says 100 zenith here, for example, for that element. Step 3 would be to tailor things such as, is it one-handed or two-handed, and if, depending, you would either reduce the damage or increase the damage. And you would also add bonuses such as accuracy bonuses. Each one of these things that you're going to affect the item with is going to have a zenith related effect. So again, look at the chart, I'll have it on the screen. But you basically want to either make the item more expensive, is going to make it more rare, and make it more effective. That's kind of the concept here. And then finally, there is a list of qualities. There's both defensive and offensive qualities. Now, the one that you'll see in the playtest will be kind of not from that list, but I did use that list to pull what I wanted from that. So again, you don't have to go off the list in here. You can use your own, ideas and concepts to make something similar with this as a baseline. So you will see that as well. And then again, with all rare items, like he kind of already hit on, you either can hide that in a chest in the dungeon that they're going to catch along their way, or it could be literally the boss dies and turns into a puff of smoke and leaves it behind, right? This is a very fantasy world, so think Final Fantasy. That happens very often where you kill the boss and there's just an item underneath them. So you can do any way you'd like, but that is one way to add a rare item into the game. And again, not listed in items, but just throwing this out there, there could be rare spells that aren't in this book or that don't exist otherwise that your chimerist could learn, right? I'm thinking very blue mage with them. They should be able to learn any enemy skill they can, and maybe there's that one special enemy you've made unique to your campaign or story, and they can pick that up, right? So I would consider that a rare item in a sense, a rare spell. So definitely can give it to spellcasters in that same vein of things. I will jump a little bit over here to the next part that's in the book, which is talking about designing battles. And I do want to kind of just talk about the current escalated version of Caspar, right? There are a couple of things in the book. This is several pages, right? It kind of goes into that more encounter focused thing, like what's an easy encounter, what's a standard encounter, what's a difficult encounter. It does give you a chart I'll show here based on your level and how many parties or how many player characters are in your party. You should be looking to face this type of enemy or this number of enemies to make this, that category of difficulty. There are also things like ranks with the creatures that you're fighting. So just think your typical like beast enemy. They're all referred to as soldiers. So don't think just like a human with a sword and a shield. Soldiers in this game is just anything that is that kind of lower tier or rank of enemy. And those are going to start as soldiers, and then you have a way to create either an elite or a champion out of that soldier or number of soldiers. And that's kind of what we've done here with Caspar. So it should be on the screen, but I've got it here to talk through it. And so essentially, let me skip forward a little bit here to the way that the stat blocks work. So they have all the things that your player character would have, right? They've got hit points, they've got resistances, let's see here, names, levels, attributes, defensives, basic attacks, spells. They might even have special rules. So what I've given here for the current Caspar, right, that we'll probably encounter first, he's very much still a thief, right? He's a rogue, and he's out there with that liquid that he drank, and he's kind of evolved further. So he's got some more monstrous elements that make him more bulky and things. And so we've affected that through his stat block as far as like his hit points and his defenses and things like that. Maybe his attacks are a little bit more effective. So he's got rare items. He's pretty stacked. He's got, assassin blades and headhunter pistol and things that are much more effective. But he's also got a special rule, which is his soul steal technique. But it's a little bit different than the rogue in the book spell steal, just because, I wanted to make it balanced for using against player characters. So you'll see that down the road, but it's a little bit different than the regular soul steal, and I might rename it just so it's not reused effect there. But I will probably throw him up on the screen just so you can see him, see what a creature stat block kind of looks like, and what this will be as far as a battle goes. But I'll let Fry talk a little bit more about some of that maybe, and also maybe talk through creating a non-player character, not necessarily a villain or a boss. So go ahead, Fry.
Right. I just want to highlight too. I do love that the thoughts of the elites and the champions. I think the way they kind of showcase balance as far as combat goes is really nice in here. It's very simple. Hey, if you want it to be easy, normal, challenging, have this many at this within this level range and stuff like that. Reminds me a lot of Lancer, which I really loved when I was building those out, applying those templates. Lancer has a lot more templates and all that, but I love that when a game has a way for you to take a normal stat block and tells you how to buff it up appropriately. Obviously, kind of depending on the power of your characters, right, your players, but I do love that side of it. I just want to highlight that not every game has balancing done very well, and I really liked the way Fabula Ultima did it here. But leading into NPCs, there are kind of two ways to go about designing NPCs, right? And the way the book lays them out is one is just reskinning, right? So You take, for instance, the book says a drake. You maybe want to just change up one thing about it. You like most of everything it has, but you want to give it the ability to fly, right? Because you want a full-on dragon. That's basically just reskinning it. It's got everything you want, slap flying on it, maybe take something off to keep it balanced or tweak it a little bit, but easy peasy. Now you've got a new monster and you've just tweaked what's already kind of there. It also could just be the way in which you describe it, right? Maybe you want a humanoid that has the abilities of a dragon. So the way in which you just describe it, describe as a human, build all that stuff, but then all of a sudden he starts popping out with like claw attacks and stuff. That's all the reskin part of it, right? Don't be afraid to take a stat plug that has everything you need, but not the right look, and just describing it in a new way. Or you can create the NPC from scratch, which of course it lays out a 8-step process for you here. We will have an NPC in ours just to showcase that, and we'll talk a little bit to that NPC here while we're going. For us, the first step is going to be kind of establishing the NPC's role and giving them 4 traits. This is going to be kind of similar in the identity, themes, and origins of a player character, but just a lot more simple. You can lay them out a lot longer. You can give them, the titles and like where they stand and all that stuff if you want. But here in the book, it's just for like the bestiary and the creatures, it's just 4 like words, right? So for like the drake, it's like scales, lazy, things like that. So you don't have to get too in depth with it. It's just 4 traits that kind of define them, and it'll help you kind of play through their personalities and like how they interact with with the people around them. That's what your traits are kind of focused on here. Then next, you're going to choose the NPC's level. At a minimum, they have to be 5. At a maximum, they'll go to 60. So depending on if you want them to, be kind of like a lackey or a sidekick, you might want to drop them a little lower than your party. If you want them to be more of a mentor or a hero to the party, right, you might make them just a couple levels higher. Just don't, if you have a party of level 10s and 15s, don't give them a level 60 NPC if they're meant to interact with them and, travel with them, right? You don't want to outshine the party. And if the NPC ends up being a villain, right, just make sure that it's level appropriate if you plan on them fighting them. If you have a level 10 party and you make your villain, your NPC level 60, cool, just make sure you're not setting the party up to try and attack them and then, kill them on accident or on purpose. Just make sure you're just being appropriate with the level, right? And then step 3, you're going to choose their species. Each species has its own kind of rules, has like little bonuses, little negatives maybe, which we'll throw up on the screen there. But beast, construct, demon, elemental, humanoid, monster, plant, or undead are your options. Just a little sneak peek, our NPC will be undead. They will be a ghost-like figure, so more to come on that one. Then, of course, you're going to give them their attribute die. So, same as the players, you have your jack of all trades, your standard, your specialized, and your super specialized. For our purposes, I'm going to stick them with standard. They're not meant to do anything super crazy or be specialized in any way, so they're just going to get that standard D10, 2 D8s, and a D6. And then you're going to have them have their attacks built out. This is just their basic attack, what they'll use kind of like by default. It can be either melee or a ranged attack. You'll give the attack a name. For ours, I'm going to go with something like, Spirit Blast, Spirit Slash, something like that. I haven't quite decided if they're going to be melee or ranged yet, but something spirit related. What attribute they're going to use. So it could be, Dex and Willpower, Insight Willpower, Double Might. The damage is going to be your high roll, +5, and then whatever the damage type is, and that's just the default damage. So if you're rolling, D10, D8, you roll a 6 and a 5, it'll be 6 + 5 slashing, right? And that'll be what you do on that turn. Then your basic attacks, they'll also be modified by the skills. So your NPCs will also have skills. They receive a number of free skills based on their species. So when we throw the species up there, it'll say off to the right side there, for example, the beasts, they start with 4 skills. And your race will determine that, or their species will determine that. They will gain an additional skill for every 10 levels that they are. So for our NPC, they will be maybe 5 or 10. I haven't quite decided yet, so they might get an extra skill from that. And then they gain a number of extra skills by taking an equal number of vulnerabilities. So if you want to give your NPC a vulnerability, they will gain 2 additional skills from that. And then these skills can either be NPC skills, which they have a list of in the book here, or they can come from the character classes as well. So you can actually pull in class skills as well, just however you want to mix and match them up. And then, of course, you'll calculate all their kind of secondary scores, just like you do with player characters. You have their initiative. This one is their dexterity die size plus their base insight die size divided by 2. So they may actually have higher or lower initiative than your player characters there. You do their max HP, crisis score, MP, defense, magic defense, has it all laid out on how you calculate all that based on the die sizes, their levels, and things like that. And then finally, they'll get bonus to accuracy checks and magic checks equal to their level divided by 10, rounded down to a minimum of 0. So you just got to do a little bit of the math just to add that onto them there. But that is the way you make a basic one. And then throughout the steps there, they have kind of little nuggets of, hey, if your NPC is level 20, 40, 60, things like that, you'll, bump up the attribute die, or you'll bump up their accuracy checks or things like that. So just make sure, or they'll do more damage, right? So just make sure you're paying attention to that if you're building them up at a higher level. But real quick, easy, you could probably make up a NPC in about like 5-10 minutes once you get it down right, once you're kind of used to it. Really quick to make one, which I really appreciate on that. Sometimes building NPCs is kind of the hardest part because you're like trying to figure out what they are going to do, and this lays it out for you step by step where you need to be pulling from them. So really love that. You gotta have one nice and built out and just showcasing those, and we'll have their character sheet pop up as well, so you can take a look at that and just kind of see how we use those steps to build them out.
These are the 5 videos that we felt were necessary for Fabula Ultima. This is a, I don't know, 350 some page, not including the glossary and the introduction pages and all that. So beautiful, beautiful book. Love the artwork. Love everything that's in here. We've hit on it in every video. The step-by-steps and the way they lay out and explain the game are phenomenal. Even for a player to just pick this up, quickly find a chapter and read through something they maybe don't have a full understanding of is super great. So we will put out another video. Not sure if we'll call it chapter 6 just yet. Maybe we will, like a miscellaneous chapter. But what we'll probably put out for the next video is we're going to reach to an atlas that was created by someone that reached out to us. We're going to kind of showcase their atlas, a couple of things that it consists of, and how you can use the atlases that exist in Fabula Ultima to basically, plug and play that world that consists in that atlas. So keep an eye out for that one. And then after that, you'll see the one-shot slash playtest. I keep calling it either one. It's our first time playing, so it's a playtest, but it's a one-shot. So yeah, a couple interesting things in there. Myself and Fry will both be kind of DM, co-DM, and also Tristan, co-Tristan. So we're going to be playing one character and DMing at the same time. So should be interesting and unique, but we want to make sure all the bases are covered so that the team has a great experience and everyone that might watch can enjoy it as well, hopefully. So until the next time, we appreciate you. We look forward to seeing you in the comments, and also hopefully see you in the comments of our other videos. Until then, keep that shield wall strong.